I come from a neighbouring country called Congo, and there's such a big conflict going on with people from Rwanda. So had my family members come from Goma on a crossing right now, would they then be sent back to the country that they're supposedly warring, Rwanda? From Congo? Yeah.
I mean, Rwanda is a different country, Congo, isn't it? It's a different country.
It's like watching an American play GeoGuessr. What are you doing? What are you doing, mate? Look at her face. No way, bruv.
Hi. If the threat of death is not a deterrent, why will Rwanda be?
Of course, the Safety of Rwanda bill was passed on Monday night. It took 2 years, but it got through on Monday night. Wes?
I don't think it is going to work. I think we've spent £250 million already without a single flight taking off. Even if it achieves Rishi Sunak's bar of success, we're talking about 1% of small boat arrivals going to Rwanda, tune of about £2 million per person. And thinking back to the last question, I think there are quite a few people around here with like £2 million a year to get by and would make quite a life.
Someone said they worked it out and it would be cheaper to house these people at the Ritz.
Oh yeah, literally, just book out the K West in London.
Changing difference. I think the fact we had to change the law to declare Rwanda a safe country when the courts had looked at the evidence and concluded otherwise makes a mockery of Parliament. I think the fact that we still see people coming over and dying in the Channel, at the same time they're being smuggled by criminal gangs who are making a tidy profit out of human misery and suffering and exploitation is a disgrace. The fact we've got so many people in this country today who've come here seeking refuge, who are unable to work and participate and contribute to the country that's taken them in and they want to be part of, because their claim hasn't been processed and no decision's been made. I think the whole system is a mess. And, when you've got everyone from Labour and the Liberal Democrats through to Nigel Farage saying this scheme is not going to work, it is not going to be a deterrent, and even the Prime Minister himself, when he was Chancellor, opposing the scheme in Cabinet because he didn't think it would work.
Home Secretary.
The fact we've spent so much time and so much public money on a gimmick is an absolute disgrace, especially when money is so scarce and the people we're talking about, yes, there'll be some people taking the mick, there always are, but we're talking about people who have fled suffering, torture, misery, and are in a desperate situation that none of us would ever wish to be. And having seen some of those people in my constituency advice surgery, desperate to participate, desperate to be part of this country, desperate to build a new life, and they are demonised in the way that we've seen with ugly rhetoric from people like Suella Braverman, who is still a Conservative MP, even though she associates with the far right across Europe. I think it's an absolute disgrace, and it's a shame on our...
And the far right in Israel.
True.
The government of Israel.
Yeah.
Politics.
Wow, West Streeting said things I entirely agree with.
I think it's essential that we...
Yeah, I mean... the rarest of rare Wes Streeting W's. Well
Literally, I couldn't disagree with anything that he'd said there.
These boat crossings, there's a number of reasons. Firstly, they are dangerous. We saw 5 people dying earlier this week, including a young girl. Those aren't the first.
Yep, blood's on your hands, mate.
Deaths. Secondly, these crossings are unnecessary because France is a safe country. Nobody needs to flee war.
Not how it works.
The people crossing are those who are able to pay people smugglers. They are almost entirely young.
Oh yeah, they're rich. Yeah, all of them are very rich. Obviously, you're a very serious man. We should take seriously.
Let's have a look. Let's have a quick check. We've not done the education check yet, have we? And the history check of the background of Mr. Chris Philp, have we? Let's go do that. Let's have a look.
I'm going to guess. No, I don't think it's going to be Eton. I think it's going to be a minor public school.
It was actually a grammar school. It was a grammar school that he went to in London. So it was technically a state school, but he did indeed go to Oxford, University College Oxford.
Yeah, of course he did.
Men, and there are other people that we would want to welcome: families, children, people with vulnerabilities, people that come from more dangerous places, as we have done, welcoming people directly from Syria, Afghanistan and Ukraine, for example. So we do have to stop these boats, which are dangerous and unnecessary. Now, the question...
Why is Afghanistan dangerous? Didn't we make it peaceful with 20 years of blood and gold?
40 years, remember? Like, we were the ones who gave the weapons to Gulbuddin Hekmataya.
True. It's almost like our imperialism made that situation a lot worse. Wonder if there's any lessons going forward we could learn from that.
The question was, will the programme, the Rwanda plan, actually work? And there are two examples, two case studies that I can give in support of the hypothesis that it will act as a deterrent. The first of those is in Australia about 10 years ago. They had a very similar problem. People crossing from, I think it was Indonesia. They implemented a program called Operation Sovereign Borders, very similar.
Globally condemned for human rights violations on Nauru, Manus Island and Papua New Guinea. And on top of that, deliberately used it as a way of taking government money and handing it to their mates.
Perfect Tory policy. You get to be unbelievably racist and needlessly cruel to people who are desperate. You get to use private contracts, which you can then give lots of public money to your friends and donors. It's literally the Venn diagram of the interest of the Tory party as a circle.
And even, not even just the Rwanda plan as a way of shoveling money from the state into the hands of their mates. Serco are the ones, or one of the people who got the contracts to be able to do the hotel stays for the asylum seekers who are waiting for their claims to get heard.
Responsible to the Rwanda scheme, and very quickly, their illegal maritime arrivals that were about the same level as ours went down to zero. Now, they didn't have to ship 50,000 people somewhere for the deterrent effect to work. It was a relatively small number before the deterrent effect kicked in. Now, let me give you a second example. In 2022, the most numerous nationality crossing the channel was for people from Albania. We reached a returns agreement with the Albanian government where people who came across got returned to their home country, Albania. And very quickly, the number of Albanian people crossing the channel went down by 95%. So those two examples, Australia and the recent Albanian example here, shows how the deterrent effect works. Then we'll have capacity, more capacity, to help people in most need. Now, we've done that already by taking people directly from Afghanistan, directly from Syria, and directly from Ukraine, and Hong Kong, let's not forget, people in genuine need. What we can't do is have people entering the country dangerously, illegally, from a safe place, namely France. Nobody needs to flee war in France. There is no war going on in France.
We're an island, yeah?
It's also worth pointing out as well is that the numbers that we're talking about here for Operation Sovereign Borders is, like, again, in the hundreds and thousands, where we are having the tens of thousands. Actually, the difference in terms of the amount of people you'd have and the amount it would cost to send people elsewhere. Right? It's not exactly that much to send people to a small detention centre in Nauru or Manus Island. But, that's when you're thinking of the numbers that we are dealing with, which is tens of thousands.
Yeah, especially if it's costing more than it would to put them up at the Ritz.
Exactly.
So I'm sure nobody here and nobody at home wants to see people die in the Channel. I mean, that is a given. I wonder how much public support do you think there is for the Rwanda policy? Well,
this is, I think, about, I haven't seen polling on it. I think it is, in some places, pretty popular. But this isn't about trying to get popularity. This policy
every week.
Without fail.
is about trying to do the right thing to make sure that people are not undertaking these dangerous, we've seen they're dangerous. People have died this week. We have to stop these crossings completely, and we have to concentrate our resources on helping those people in most need, which is not, generally speaking, young single men paying people smugglers.
Okay. The woman there in the cap,
You mentioned the Australia scheme and the scheme to send people back to Albania. The places that they were sending those migrants are not unsafe countries, or in the same way that Rwanda is. So morally, how can you justify sending migrants who have come to Britain looking for a safe place to live? How can you justify sending them to a country that is not confirmed to be safe?
Are you saying that Albania is not safe?
Well, they literally tried to say that Libya was safe.
I mean,
like it's a joke.
Yeah, and it is a joke. It's a joke. I mean, Albania has its problems. I think it is a safe country, but like the Kosovars who are trying to flee Albania to come here maybe aren't safe back in Albania, but we have a returns agreement because they're a European nation. That's what we have there. We can't really have a returns agreement with Iran, can we? But on top of that, she's saying, well, these places they were sending them to were safe. And I'm like, well, actually, there was the Nauru detention centre was such a grave human rights violations. It turned Australia into an international disgrace. So I mean, whilst I think Rwanda is probably worse, like, it's still not great.
No, I'm saying that Chris said that Albania is a safe country and it's not a dangerous country. So sending migrants back there
is not the same as sending people to Rwanda. That's the point you're making. Okay, Chris.
Rwanda is, in our view, a safe country. I mean, the UNHCR themselves. The UN High Commission on Refugees themselves send refugees to guess where? Rwanda. The UNHCR
from other African countries, saying that they're happy for the people to be in Rwanda because I guess it's better than being in Goma or in Kivu, right? That's not exactly a high bar.
And to be clear, the court case in the autumn, there was a particular reason they said that they were unhappy with Rwanda. And it was to do with the risk that Rwanda, not that Rwanda was in itself unsafe, the court had a concern about Rwanda sending people elsewhere, some other country that might not be safe. And so that's why, I think actually today, we've ratified a new treaty with Rwanda.
I think today. Don't think. No. Get briefed. Learn things.
Why is it with our politicians are just not being briefed?
Yeah.
Confirming that in relation to people that go from the UK to Rwanda, that will not happen. There is a treaty obligation on Rwanda not to do that, and that direct.
But considering your government wants to break treaty obligations, what's to stop Rwanda from breaking its treaty obligations in limited and specific ways, of course?
Directly addresses the concern raised by the Supreme Court.
There's probably going to be quite a few questions for you, Chris. I'm just going to go around quite a few people in the audience. Yes, man here in the white T-shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a huge amount wrong with this policy and the whole idea of it. But I'll come to two things. The first thing is the money that's been spent. It's a huge waste of taxpayers' money. Yep. And if I could, I would withdraw my consent for my taxpayers' money to be used in that way. I think it's morally reprehensible. And then that brings me on to the next point, which is the language and the rhetoric around this. I think we need to bring humanity back into this discussion. And when I speak to friends that live overseas and meet people from overseas, I'm actually embarrassed by the reputation that my country has around this. And that message transcends borders, and people hear what you have to say. And I think we should bring some more positivity and humanity back to the debate.
Bro.
Man in the, you've got grey zip top on, yeah.
Yeah, what's his name? Chris?
This is Chris, yes.
Yeah, Chris.
Philp.
I come from a neighbouring country called Congo, if you know geographically, that it's located right next door
He
to
doesn't
Rwanda.
know.
And right now in Goma, there's a genocide going on, and there's such a big conflict going on with people from Rwanda. So had my family members come from Goma...
True, but the only Goma I'm interested in is Guy Goma.
Oh my God, Guy Goma, what an absolute legend. Important point, that really important point that's being talked about here is that one of the reasons why Rwanda, I believe, is not a country you should be sending anybody to is the fact that in the regional conflict in Goma, which is in the Kivu region of eastern Congo, bordering with Rwanda, there's like a breakaway militant group called the March 23rd movement who they're literally being funded by the Rwandan government to destabilise a neighbouring country to the point at which the two countries might go to war.
It seems like definitely a place we should send people then. 100%. That seems like a very safe and stable place to be sending incredibly vulnerable people to.
On a crossing right now, would they then be sent back to the country that they're supposedly warring, Rwanda? Does that make any sense to you?
No, I think there's an exclusion on people from Rwanda being sent to Rwanda.
They're not from Rwanda, they're from Congo.
They're from
Congo. Jesus Christ.
He's such an idiot.
Are you listening to what he said?
They're supposedly warring these people from Rwanda. Are they then going to be sent to Rwanda if they came here on a crossing?
From
Congo? Yeah.
Would people be
He doesn't know. Oh my God.
He doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
sent from... Well, I mean, Rwanda is a different country to Congo, isn't it?
Wing,
It's a different
and
country.
I loved it.
It's like watching an American play GeoGuessr. What are you doing? What are you doing, mate? What? Oh, it's a different country.
No, so how are they coming from, Rwanda or Wakanda? Just want to make sure.
Rwanda forever. Amazing. Look, I mean, just
the shocked face. The shocked face.
Yeah, look at the woman's. Oh, that's behind my chat. Look at her face. No way, bruv.
You're saying if they come from a war zone in Congo, would...
Wesley with the shade.
Oh dear Lord! Oh my God! Perfect. I could not have. What?
Beautiful.
Could not have gone,
Oh.
to Rwanda. That's
Well,
the point he's making.
so there is a clause in the legislation that says if somebody would suffer, I think the phrase is serious and irreversible harm by being sent somewhere, they wouldn't be sent. So there is that safety mechanism built into the legislation.
Charles.
I think that went really well, mate.
top
Yeah,
draw,
I think
top draw.
you absolutely nailed it, bro. I'm sure the Prime Minister is very happy with your work.
Just the question there raised the point about...
So tell me, this Congo, is it where they make the umbongo? or not? That's what I've heard. I don't know.
The safety of Rwanda. I have been to Rwanda. I was involved in a charity there which did a lot of good work. And I must say that it has certainly doesn't have a sort of unblemished reputation. It is actually quite an orderly and well-run country. I think people looking down, they think, oh, it's a sort of primitive African country. I don't think that's...
Well, I mean, I'm sure many people who read The Spectator do think of it that way. But most people who are criticising the plan are not doing so from the perspective of it being primitive or in like some sort of weird racist way. It's that it's underdeveloped.
Corrupt,
It's that it's not a place. Well, corrupt, underdeveloped, not an appropriate place to be sending incredibly vulnerable people to. It's not appropriate.
Yeah, there's a reason why you think that there are plenty of non-corrupt and well-developed countries in Africa, but there's a reason why Botswana doesn't want to be our asylum seeker dumping ground.
Yeah, because it's not so desperate for the money that it'll do anything. Yeah, basically.
That's true. And I think that's an important point to make. Another point I think should be made is that one must also speak up for the rights of people who live in this country. I feel great sympathy for the people who wish to cross, but it's not right. It's not right for them, and it's not right for us, for illegal immigrants to come in large numbers. It's wrong. And we also have a very big problem with...
These people are not illegal migrants. They are not illegal migrants. It is explicitly a framing concept of the Conservative government to have referred to them as that when that's explicitly not what they are. If you arrive via irregular means, which is what the government calls it on their own website, because they can't call it illegal migration. They call it the illegal migration bill to make you think that that's the case, but it's just not. They're irregular migrants. Because they're irregular because they have arrived via irregular means and then claim asylum because there are no legal ways to arrive or regular ways to arrive to then claim asylum if you do not have a legal or safe route to be able to get to the country by. They become illegal if their asylum claim fails and they don't leave, or if they don't declare themselves as an asylum seeker after arriving via irregular means. But if you arrive on a small boat and you claim asylum, that is the legal process. It's the internationally legal process for how you claim asylum if there's no official safe and legal route for you to get there by. So the turn of phrase, the rhetoric of calling them illegal migrants is a con. It's not true.
Legal migration as well. We had, I think, net 640,000 people come in last year. That's massive, and it's very hard to deal with. It puts enormous strain on social services, and it is the right of the elected parliament to make a decision about this. And sitting in the House of Lords...
Yeah, but it's not up to the elected parliament to break law. That's not how it works, is it? We have pre-existing law, pre-existing treaties that we're obliged to follow.
As all this went through and we were all debating it, I moved more to the supporting the bill than I had to start with, because I thought it was not right for us in the Lords to go against the elected MPs in the Commons. And I thought...
Why do you exist then? If you are not there to refine the legislation or to oppose anything the Commons does because of the democratic deficit, which, by the way, is true, why do you exist? Why is the Lords there?
It was not right for judges to be the ultimate arbiters of this. This is a matter for...
It's not up to judges to decide on law. Who would then?
Democratic parliament. And if a democratic parliament wants to do this in defence of the rights of citizens, it must be able to do that. And that's why in the end the Lords finally did give in.
It was not a manifesto pledge.
No.
Nobody voted on the Rwanda plan as part of a parliamentary manifesto. That's not what that's supposed to mean. That's why the Lords could block it for so long, is because there was no way of forcing it through using, for example, the Parliament Act, because it was a manifesto commitment. It was some random policy that was coked up by Priti Patel, because this is a Patel-era policy, this one, and Boris Johnson, based upon a new phenomenon that had appeared during that period. That's not indeed how you're supposed to do the Lords.
Yeah. And it's now being implemented by a foreign secretary who said it was batshit, and a former Chancellor of the Exchequer who's now Prime Minister who tried to block it when it was initially suggested. To say that this is somehow an infringement of the democratic rights of Parliament is tenuous to the point of incredulity.
I think we were right to do so. Please, let's have some proportion about this. This is not... there is a very, very strong need to stop illegal migration. And if we get it right, which we may well not, I admit, then if people don't go on these boats, that'd be fantastic. It'd be fantastic for them, their safety, and it'd be better for Britain.
This has been a colossal failure. £241 million of taxpayers' money has been wasted on what is essentially policy by press release, because we're heading into an election, and Rishi Sunak thinks this might help him win a few votes when he's plummeting in the polls. That £241 million, we've just been talking about accessing GPs and getting healthcare. £241 million would have paid for 5.7 million GP appointments. Or it could have paid for 6,000 Home Office caseworkers to clear the 128,000 asylum backlog. And actually, if we had a system that worked efficiently, processed people quickly, and sent those back who weren't entitled to be here, that would be a far bigger deterrent. And 3/4 of those who have come over in boats are actually coming from places like Afghanistan, because we haven't kept our commitments there to allow in people who have helped the UK and the US, and I had a case in my surgery just a couple of weeks ago about somebody who worked with the US and UK forces and as an interpreter and had his application rejected. I'm working with my constituent to help him help his friend who has been tortured by the Taliban.
But Boris Johnson did allow his friend to ring him up and get some dogs saved from Afghanistan instead.
It's so bleak, isn't it?
Don't get me wrong, I don't want dogs to die in Afghanistan or anything, but if there's limited room on a plane, I think people do need to take priority, actually.
And is now in hiding and separated from his family. So we need more safe and legal routes and to keep our promises to the Afghan people. But the problem is the government doesn't want to focus on the mundane tasks of fixing the backlog and sorting out those safe and legal routes.
Not interested in governance.
This is an election-grabbing headline. Well, frankly, the people are fed up of it, and it's time. We just had a general election.
Victor.
Right.
Well, you know, I'm always intrigued by... I was listening to Charles and others. I'm always intrigued by when people who are members of the House of Lords or members of the government say, I've been to Rwanda and it's perfectly safe. I mean, when you get off the... if I got off the plane in Rwanda, I'm sure it'd be perfectly safe. You know, decent hotel, you know, gin and tonic at 5 o'clock. But I'll tell you what, I won't want to live there. And I'll tell you why I won't want to live there. Because my gay friends couldn't come and visit me. Because, as that chap...
They've already attempted to remove LGBT affiliation, so basically being a queer person, from one of the reasons that you can seek asylum in Britain.
There's still skirmishes on the borders with other countries, which means it's not safe. Right?
Hang on, did we get clarification? They are different countries, right?
It's also worth pointing out, being explicit, that it's literally being funded by the Rwandan government, the continuation of the Kivu conflict.
Yeah.
It's just not safe. And because you've been there, I mean, you think it's serious, you think it's safe to send... I just think that's nonsense. I'll just be very honest with you. I think the examples that you gave, you know, there is something... Policies that are cruel might work, but they're still cruel. And we shouldn't be doing them. And by the way, the conditions that Australia sends those people to on an island off the coast are appalling. They're actually appalling. So let's just be clear about that. I also think that, look, there's 60-odd million people in this
literally, I mean, if you have the stomach for it, you can look it up. But content warning therein. The conditions were so bad that there was a protest at one of them where they began to sew their own lips shut.
By and large, right, we are kind, good people. We know that because we've just taken thousands of Ukrainians in, plus thousands of people from Hong Kong Chinese, right? So we know that. We also know that there are places and people where cruelty is popular. You, the government, should not be supporting that on that basis. You know it's cruel. There are three things about this thing which are wrong. First is, this is a country of law, and yes, you're right, we have got a democracy in the government that leads us under law, right? And it was High Court judges that said that Rwanda was unsafe, not some think tank or a couple of people behind it. It was the High Court. They said it was unsafe, and then in order to respond to that, the government said, we think it's a bit like the government saying, we're going to legislate against gravity because it's inconvenient. To which my response is, take you to the top of Victoria Tower, you jump first. So I just think...
Oh, God, such be so based.
Also, I absolutely unironically support that plan.
True, absolutely, 100%. I agree, absolutely. What's interesting as well, it's really great he brought up the Hong Kong Ukraine thing. It's like they have safe and legal routes. I wonder why we've not got the same from South Sudan.
Is that a different country to Congo and Rwanda?
It is indeed.
Oh, okay. I'm learning so much tonight. That's 3 countries in Africa.
And also on top of that, really another point as well is he talked about, law and order, right? The Conservative Party always talk of themselves as being the party of law and order. And after all of this stuff where they've deliberately tried to flout the law and tried to legislate reality in limited specific ways, of course, only limited in specific ways, that that the law part is bullshit. The law is the method. The order is the end game. Order is what they crave because that is what gives them their authoritarian kind of boner, I guess.
Yeah. What I think Victor's missing is that the present circumstances are cruel. It's very, very cruel that this system is this great big business model of crooks sending people across boats to in very uncertain future. That's cruel, and
it is cruel, which is why you should smash that system by ending the demand for it by opening safe and legal routes.
It's pretty difficult when they get here because if you ever have very large numbers of people arriving, it's very hard to look after them properly.
Really?
Even in a rich country, that is a serious.
Hang on, Charles. Sorry.
And
look, you know something that really gets me. The fact of the matter is, there's a way of talking about this. Human beings live together for thousands of years. It's always been difficult, right? Always been difficult. What makes it more difficult is when we get the kind of performative language that suggests that you should live in fear of people that don't look like you, people have come from a different place. You started it.
No,
I would rather that you actually talked about hope. You gave people examples of which there are millions of the benefits of migration. The actual fact that your family, people on this panel, you go back far enough, all of us have come from somewhere.
Victor, let me let Charles
also,
answer.
as well,
I need to
really important to point out here too is that he's saying, it's bad for these people if they're left waiting for an asylum claim to get heard, whatever it might be. We were literally processing double the number of asylum claims in the 2000s. Double the number. This is an austerity problem. This phrase, we don't have anywhere to put them. We don't have the time, the resources to be able to, even in a rich country. That's bollocks, right? We've got more billionaires than we've ever had, Charles. There's plenty of money flying around that we could be taxing to be able to have a state that can actually deal with this demand. You just don't want to do it because they're your mates.
Yep.
Have that performative language.
It's not performative. I think it's very difficult to take in a very large number of people at any one time, particularly if they're not legal. And apart from anything else, if there's a queue, they're jumping it, and that is
that's his real issue with this is the queue jumping. The fact that there is literally no real queue because there are no safe and legal routes by which you could come here in the first place. Like they're not jumping a queue that doesn't exist. They all have to do the supposedly illegal or irregular, as the phrase would be, thing.
Yeah.
Because there's no way of not doing that.
And we know that there's no way of doing it because Braverman was asked, as Home Secretary, in the Home Affairs Select Committee, what would be the route somebody would take from, like, Eritrea or something, and she couldn't answer the question.
Yeah.
It's a serious problem. It's not good that we have 45,000 people in hotels. And you can't say, oh, well, this is easily answered.
Let me deal with that issue.
And
hang on.
Please, Victor, I think you're being rude and unfair to people who have absolutely genuine worries about this situation.
You just call everyone racist.
That's it. But the thing is, again, because he's just talking nonsense, saying, it's bad we have people in hotels. Yeah, because we don't have enough caseworkers because of austerity. Again, I will go back to the point I made before. We were processing double the number of claims in the 2000s. The idea that we don't have the capacity to deal with these claims and the hotels are just a problem with the volume of people we have coming, bollocks. Not true. Not true in the slightest. We've processed them before. We'll do it again.
And again, another example of austerity actually being very expensive in the long run.
Yep.
They cut number of people that, by comparison, was very, very little for the taxpayers' burden. And now we've got such a backlog that it's costing us a fortune to keep people in hotels.
But again, as we say every single time, the Conservatives are not interested in the role of governance. They want to shovel public money into the pockets of their mates. And who is running one of the contracts to house migrants in hotels? Of course, it's Serco, run by the brother of an ex-Tory MP and the grandson of Winston Churchill.
Whoop, whoop.
I accept the worry.
Because you're saying this language is performative.
It is performative.
Really, when you're talking about 2 million immigrants,
It
you're
is
saying something dark and unkind. It's not.
No, it is performative. And I've given you an example.
Hang on,
It's not true.
I hear what you're saying. But let Charles answer as well.
Every country in the world needs to be concerned about the level of immigration. It doesn't mean that immigration is all bad. Of course, it doesn't mean that. But it is a serious concern.
Yeah, some of them are
more
white.
serious concern. And I'm rather dismayed that that point is not really being discussed tonight. I think it's really, really important, and it will be really important, I think, at the election.
And I'd add one more point. It's also reasonable for any country to have some kind of control. So we can debate this and we can agree or disagree about how much or little immigration we think is right. But it should be for the democratic parliament to decide that, and not for people illegally entering the country paying people smugglers. We can agree who we need to come here to
go
work,
after the people smugglers.
which we're doing.
Also,
Obviously,
again,
Wes, we're doing that.
It'd be so
Obviously,
much
we're doing
better if you
that.
put the money from the...
And again, Wes is going to talk about like processing the queues or whatever. That's fine. But when he says things like, we should be able to choose the amount of people that we take in because we're taking hundreds of thousands, I'm like, that's legal migration. That's your fault. That's your policy. If people don't want that, they can vote for that the next election to have a reduced level of migration. That's the right of the public to be able to choose that democratically. But our international agreements on asylum do not have the same level of limit that we can put. We don't have a way of capping the number of asylum seekers that we take under the agreements that we should and have been signed up to for over half a century at this point. If they have a legitimate asylum claim, we have to hear that claim and accept it if it's reasonable. Even Australia did that. They processed them in Nauru and Manus Island or whatever. But after processing, if they had a genuine asylum claim, they came to Australia. They got resettlement in Australia as a refugee. The people with the legitimate claims, by the way, we know they're legitimate because we're not distinguishing them from each other, who get sent to Rwanda are not going to come to the UK afterwards. In fact, our system, despite Rwanda being like marginally better than Nauru or whatever, is more draconian in the end point of how it ends up in terms of our commitment to these legislation that we're supposed to be following than the Australian sovereign borders operation is as well.
Rwanda, if you put it into a proper cross-border
obviously, as I get a letter every week, a classified letter from the NCA, like I can tell you that the National Crime Agency, a very large proportion of their top operations are directed against the gangs. Obviously, that's happening, but we do need to have control over who doesn't come here, both to work legally to come here and work, which we obviously value, but controlled. We'll decide who meets the criteria, and for humanitarian purposes, we should decide, the government and the public here, who should come in. And we've been very generous with Ukraine, 200,000 people. Hong Kong, Afghanistan, 25,000 people. Syria, 25,000 people. It should be based on need, not based on mostly young men paying people smugglers, leaving a manifestly safe country.
Well, 1 second.
Okay.
We should decide.
I'm just going to nip this in the bud yet again. It comes up every time we discuss Rwanda, but I just have to make this point because we're finishing this segment here. And that is that all of this discussion of young men coming over here, can young men not be victims of persecution? Can young men not be oppressed by their governments? Can they not be victims of political purges and all of these different things that mean someone but become an asylum seeker? This is unironic misandry. This is exactly what this is. This idea that men are somehow expendable and we shouldn't care about their well-being. On top of that, the young men are coming because they're the ones who are going to come here, have the asylum claim heard, and then once it gets accepted, they'll bring their family over who are also experiencing the same level of persecution. That's the reason why it's mostly men coming here. But the idea that they can't be people who would therefore need to have a valid asylum claim, that is such blatant horseshit. I need to call it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Correct.
I know.
Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.